So once you get your settlement package, there's a lot to think about, and we've talked about a few of the things. We've talked about how to reduce your tax burden. We've talked about RRSPs. We've talked a little bit about insurance. Jamie Madigan, who is a certified financial planner, can answer some more of our questions. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. When people get their settlement package, what should they be looking for from an investment point of view?
Yeah, from an investment point of view, Craig, it's really to consider the risk, how they're going to invest that, and what they need that for. So it sounds like you've already touched on RSP, so I won't go there. But from a risk perspective, what I mean is what's the likelihood that they're going to need the money, and how soon will they likely need the money? So there's typically two timeframes I talk about with my clients. The first is short term, which I usually consider to be anything a year or less.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a high likelihood that we may need the money within the next year, I typically recommend that we don't take on too much risk. And if we need it next week or in the very near future, I would almost put it in cash or money market. So we're not taking on any risk. We know it's going to be there when we need it. Otherwise, if they want to do slightly better than what a bank account would pay, which is pennies, we could consider a conservative or moderate profile. So we're taking on some risk, but not too much. And again, that's for the shorter term. Does that make sense?
Sure. And you can break it up too, right? You don't have to hold on to all of it. You can allot some for the short term and then consider the rest long-term investments, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great clarification point. So what timeframes are we look at the package as a whole? How much of that do you think we'll need in the next year? Put that into cash or at the most conservative or moderate portfolio. So we're not taking on too much risk in it, since there's a high likelihood we may need that sooner rather than later. For anything beyond a year, I typically call that long term. And the reason I do that, because if we look way back in history, every time the markets do crash, there's a downturn, correction, whatever you want to call it, typically we recover in a year. Last year was a perfect example, also
Yeah.
a severe example, because it was the fastest downturn we've ever seen, but also the fastest correction. So therefore, anything a year or more out, I always recommend that we align that to whatever that individual's risk tolerance is. And by that, I mean answering usually a 10 to 15 question questionnaire that gives a number of different questions to really help their financial advisor or financial planner determine how comfortable they are with risk, and then recommend the appropriate portfolio to align with that risk.
And just for anybody who's not clear about when we're recording this at the end of February in 2021. And, we all know what happened last year. I remember last summer, I said, I am not even looking at my accounts until Christmas, which was a great idea because by Christmas, things had kind of corrected. But, especially anybody who is losing their job during the pandemic, we're still in an economic downturn.
Right.
It's going to be harder to get a job depending on the field. So risk becomes a much bigger factor than it might at other times in history.
Exactly. And depending on how long the job process takes, like most of us don't have a crystal ball, can't really say for certain. So again, with the unlikelihood of knowing how long it could take, I would tend to recommend that we lean towards the generous side. And by that, I mean probably preserve or take on less risk than we normally would in a given situation. And depending on where that money is put, if we've already maxed out the RSP, the next logical account to go into is a TFSA, tax-free savings account. Those two are your best accounts because the money is tax sheltered and or tax-free. Within the TFSA, you can access that at any time, no penalties, no fees to do so. And within either account, again, you can choose whatever risk you're comfortable with or any combination of risk level.
So for people who are just, if you've lost your job, your head is swimming. You're not really sure what to do. There's a lot of not just thoughts, but a lot of emotions going on. But when it comes to the money they're getting, they do have a lot of options, more than they might think. So it's
Yes.
definitely worthwhile to sit down with your financial planner and come up with a strategy.
Yeah, for certain. Because what we do, Craig, is we look at their specific situation and what are the tax consequences of getting that severance pay? How can we minimize those tax consequences? What avenues do we have to invest that money so it's available to us? And how should we invest that money? How much risk should we be taking on? So there's a lot of different scenarios that someone like myself, a certified financial planner, can explore and make it all custom to that individual that we're speaking with.
So Jamie, some people already have their financial planners. If people don't, you're certainly open to be talking to people. If people want to get a sense of Jamie and what he does, I know Jamie puts a lot of videos out on LinkedIn. You can certainly see what he's on top of, what his thought process is, and get a sense of him. But they can also contact you directly, correct?
Yes, definitely. This past year, especially, Craig, I'm just doing my best, as you said, to put out as much educational content as I can. I'll be the first to admit my industry does a terrible job educating people on what they should know and why, what they need to know. It's like it's one big secret and we can't tell anybody. So I'm trying to put as much educational content out there as I can and also connect with as many people as I can. So there's no cost to talk to me. There are some fee-for-service advisors out there, which is another important point to note. A bit of a tongue twister. But yeah, it's free to contact me. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. Call me, text me. We can connect over Zoom or some video platform. I want to provide as many answers to the questions that people have and help to guide them to make the best decision for them.
Well, I've known Jamie, I think about a year now, almost coming on a year since I started spreading out my business a little bit more, and I can tell you that Jamie is a really good guy. He's got a good heart. His head and heart are in the right place. So I would recommend if you're looking for some help or some advice, look at the stuff he's done on LinkedIn, and don't be shy about giving him a call. He's a good guy.
Thanks very much for that, Craig. And one more thing I'd love to add is just ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's one piece of advice I always give everybody, especially when it comes to money. It's your money. Ask as many questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. As I mentioned, the industry does a terrible job educating people. And unless you've taken a personal interest in it like me, you don't know this stuff. Like, you're the expert in your field. If I've got questions about television and interviews or whatnot, I'm going to come to you. You're the expert, and I'm going to ask you all kinds of questions and not feel bad about it.
Yeah, sometimes the financial stuff, it's almost like you need a secret handshake.
Exactly.
And I appreciate all you've done to try to demystify a lot of things and get a lot of information out there. Jamie Madigan, certified financial planner. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Greg.